Bonnie? Right. Welcome everyone to the May Medical XR Council meeting for XRSI. And in this meeting, if we go to the agenda on the next slide, all right, um, we we want to do a few things. Um, One is have more of a discussion about how to activate this council more effectively in the second half of this year. And this is, the motivation behind sending out the survey that we did a few weeks ago. And if you haven't had a chance to complete it yet, we will take like a 5-minute block of time for everyone who is here to go through those questions and provide some bulleted responses, because that's really important that we make this group shaped around the people who are participating and get the most value out of it. We'll do a quick recap of what we're planning for AWE, and then Kavya will chime in at the end to give an update on the development of the responsible data governance certification that will be announced at AWE as a service via XRSI over the whole organization. Okay. All right. So I don't think we have a slide directly on the survey, but if Mona, if you could put the link to the survey in the chat so that the group has direct access to it, easy access. Richard has already completed it, and I've read through those responses. But if with the rest of the group here, Ryan, Mark, and Janet, if you could take the time we already have dedicated to this and go through those questions, and we'll take a pause in our discussion, and just keeping in mind we want to just hear your perspective on these questions of what is the function of the council, how have you participated, and what can we do differently going forward. So if you can follow that link and do that now, and then at least we'll have that documented, and then we can discuss that for a few minutes. Right. And Richard, I'm sure you have like 10,000 emails to do in like the next 5 minutes, so feel welcome to do that while we have this quiet time. Yeah. Welcome, Kavya. We're just doing the survey right now. Bonnie, may you let Joe into the meeting?
Sorry, Julia.
May you let Joe into the meeting? He says he's in the.
Joe is in the meeting.
Okay, great. Okay, right. Right. When you do have it complete, if you can just give a thumbs up, that'd be great. Okay, thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Mark. All right, we'll take like half a minute more. All right, fantastic. I see them coming in. Okay. Okay, I think we're ready to reconvene. Um, all right. So it's really helpful to have them documented, but now that we've gone through that thinking process, we can also just talk it through a little bit um, on what you guys value out of the group, and by showing up. I know you guys do find some value to it because your time is very overcommitted. So I appreciate you guys being here. But if we can share like what you do get the most value out of with this group in terms of like what we should keep doing. If anyone would like to start with that.
I'm happy to start. I think I might probably be the fastest, just given I'm pretty new to this. So, my sense is that this is a helpful group to better get a pulse on kind of what's top of mind for safety and security in the MedXR space. Um,
Okay.
I've only participated in two of these, so I'm yet
Right.
to fully get that, I think, but that's my hope is to
Okay.
have that perspective.
Got it. So that's more of the subject matter expertise of this particular group that may not be present, say, like in other clinical research cohorts.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Right. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll offer that I think one of the biggest values I get is the interaction with other folks that are, the group of people that attend these are a nice mix of academic, industry, but everyone is an expert who to some extent has experience building and or managing larger projects. And I think that it acts as an important bridge, certainly with regards to safety and security, but I think even more broadly, it acts as an important bridge between theoretical and pragmatic. And that's, what I appreciate as one of the big values.
Yeah. So rather than it just being kind of the principles to be upheld, but like how do you being with people that have actually tested the implementation of those principles. I think is one of the unique things of this multidisciplinary group. Okay. Richard or Janet?
So for me, it's been a few days since I filled this form in, but I think I would echo what Mark and Joe have already said. Certainly for us in the NHS, in the UK, this is an important benchmark to see how we're doing internationally in terms of safety and privacy, particularly staff. And I guess the AI aspect as well coming into that as well increasingly as well around the privacy implications of that. I think for me, and I know we've talked about this before, and I think I've put this in the survey as well, there's a big thing around policy that I think we should be influencing, and if we're not, then potentially there's an opportunity for this group to be more involved in
Yeah.
policy things.
And XRSI as a whole has been effective at that at a few levels. I think doing that with the MedXRSI Council, like at that level in healthcare related policy, is possible, but we need to hone our energy towards it, because it's a different challenge than putting out safety guidelines and doing research of that type, and a lot of it is relational. There is someone formerly of our federal government who does have experience on that policy side, has worked on the policy side, and is currently in between jobs, that I think would be a really good fit here. And so that gives me more reason to kind of invite her in, because her expertise are in developing policy around like emerging technologies and digital health. So understanding that perspective would help the group, I think. Yeah. Okay. So let me just make a note of that. Okay. Janet, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, no, I think very similar answers, I guess. But for me, there's also the piece of sort of interacting with different people and seeing sort of the impact and thinking about it on a more global or a broader forum than my research allows me to, and that kind of feeds back into some of my design research as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, because when we're in the lab, we have to focus on such a specific area and get the job done. But then here we're able to kind of see what's going on across many different domains. So in that sense, it's keeping us all educated from each other's work.
And I think it's also ties into sort of like more real world impact today, as opposed to my research is usually 5 or 10 years out. So that's sort of a nice feedback loop personally as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's, so it's kind of calibrating where the work fits in. And I think hopefully give more hope and encouragement to continue doing that, to see what's coming forward. I'd say my assessment of what's working and what value we've produced has been in coming up with very specific projects that lean on the expertise of the group we have now. In developing the safety guidelines, this has been part of that. And believe it or not, we are really close to getting some of that done. I know it feels like I've been saying it's almost there, like the last 3 council meetings, but it really is almost there. And that does bring out the advisory component of the council, which is its core function, is to, when needed, lean on the specific expertise of the group here, and then, like Janet said, kind of collectively educate each other and keep each other informed of the goings on. the challenge in executing those those research projects have really fallen on the time management and capacity for us collectively, where we're all trying to fit this in between all our other responsibilities. And when when those foundational things for us like come to the forefront, like figuring out where our funding is going to come from for the next year, I've seen us put this sort of thing to the back burner. And that's kind of the reality of it. And so we've internally on the operations side thinking about how do we buffer against that reality of our responsibilities while still moving this volunteer and nonprofit organization forward. And one thing that is effective, still not fast, but effective, is bringing in more student volunteers to do more of the background research under our direction. And this is how we've been finishing up the global landscape policy work, where we have a student from University of Washington, a neuroscience student there, I believe neuroscience or biomedical engineering. I forgot Bono. Sneha's major.
Neuro.
Neuro, yeah. And so I've been working with her to complete the analysis, edit her work, but the majority of the time-consuming research work and writing has been done by her, and it's been a learning experience. So I would say like in your own organizations, if you find a student like that who is interested in this and can help do that heavy lifting, it will move us along. And another example, I brought in one of my students to help me with the case study analysis and the development of the IRB guidelines that has been presented for primer. It's getting hosted on our Santa Clara University's Applied Ethics site, both the case studies and the guidelines. So it will get distribution there, a place where we can point to it in addition to the XRSI. And with things like this, it's important that it shows up on our sites, right, as the origin of it, and then echoed with other partner organizations. So Santa Clara's Applied Ethics Center is great for that. As we develop the safety guidelines, I've casually discussed with Mark, looking at how AMXRA can elevate their visibility and give that external review of the suggestions to make sure they actually fit into a clinical ecosystem. They're following the norms of that professional association as well. So Mark, once we do complete the safety guidelines, right, which will go under review at the Journal of Medical Extended Reality, we had mentioned also having that AMXRA involvement in that. How would you see that moving forward? Do you see that as people within that AMXRA leadership doing another review of it and edit, and then giving it after that process doing endorsement, or as a co-authorship before it gets submitted to the journal?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think if it is going to be submitted under the AMXRA guidelines, there probably should be some co-authorship with some members, but I believe, Julia, you're a member anyways, I think. I'm not, I'd have to double check, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But fine, just I think that's it. And then I would work closely with Rohan and Brennan,
Yeah.
who's also the chair for the guidelines committee,
Right. So
to like figure out how to do this. It's more about the branding, right? And to be perfectly transparent, we're still figuring out what the formal SOP will be as we move this forward. But this could be a really great opportunity to really kind of come up with a protocol for endorsing through AMXRA.
Okay.
The previous two guidelines have been done like primarily by AIM X-ray members, and because it's been Brennan was the editor in chief and also the chair for guidelines, it just like went through. So there is an opportunity to like think about how we actually create standards for approving, like a governance process.
Yeah, and I have sent Brennan the body of the paper. That has the meat of it, the methodology that Kavya and I have put together. He hasn't commented yet on the the content in it, like the actual methodology. I was asking more about how to format it, so to present it as a journal paper. So I think that feedback cycle needs to occur, because we do want to be aligned, and there are things that you guys are going to know that we don't know, like especially like how does on the implementation side, and any policies that we may not be aware of that need to be integrated in.
You may want to, sorry for you may want to also reach out to Rohan, since Rohan's now the editor in
Yeah.
chief. So he may be helpful, or one of his deputy editors.
Okay, I'll request a meeting before AWE, and then circulate it within the panel, so everyone's aware of that as it comes up in conversation. Okay, yeah. So that other piece of it is those partnerships. This is the other times we've been successful, is when it's XRSI plus another group. So when working with Richard the previous year for Metaverse Safety Week, partnering with NHS Education, that helped move things along. Moving with Primer, made sure things got done. Working with the journal is making sure things get done. And so I want to keep that model going. So if you see kind of other organizations that are aligned with us in mission, but in an adjacent domain where there are joint projects we can do, please bring them to our attention. Jared Kutzen just sent us a message about working with the simulation education, Healthcare Simulation Education Association. So that's something we're going to explore as well. So I think more of that, and possibly direct invitations to our council members, even more than we have, to bring people in and share their expertise a bit more. So I'll summarize these things like following the council meeting on kind of that strategic direction. But there's a lot of good we can do as we focus our energies, while not detracting from our core job functions. So thank you for that input. Is there anything else anyone else would like to add? Issues we should bring up, or other areas that large areas I've overlooked that I should research a bit more? Okay, all right, this is a good starting point. And then we'll try to get more people to complete the survey, and I'll integrate those. All right, Banu, can we go to the AWE? So I'm aware that Mark, will you still be at AWE this year?
Yep, I'll be there.
Fantastic.
Not in my VA capacity though.
AMX, right?
Yeah.
Janet, are you able to attend this year?
Yeah, I should be there as well.
Fantastic. Okay. Is anyone else attending? Okay. So that's good. I know it's not a medical conference like in any way, shape, or form, but it's still a good one to go to at least like once, to see the industry as a whole. But we have our panel on the 12th in the healthcare track. And the goal of this panel is really to talk about the efforts being made to bring these technologies into healthcare systems, and what needs to be done to do that effectively and safely. And that's why we have IVRA represented, AM X-ray represented, the Journal of Medical Extended Reality represented, in XRSI, as that touches on everything from from physicians to research to privacy policy and industry. So I'm hoping this will be useful to the audience there, and we'll be able to talk about the guidelines and highlight that to this audience of developers. And then the other thing that's going to be introduced at AWE is the responsible data governance, the RDG that that the primary XRSI organization has been developing in earnest over the last 6 months. And Kavya will explain that in more detail, but it's applicable to the developers here who are looking to create their applications to protect their end user, right? With that first and foremost, while delivering on the core purpose of what they're building. And this is something Ryan has done a lot of research on and developing the standards, policy, and methods, not policy, but standards and methods to deliver on that. And what is coming next is how to actually evaluate and audit the data governance for any application on these emerging technologies, on immersive and spatial technologies. So we have a handful of people in the group here who actually develop products, inclusive of Joe, and the responsible data governance certification will be a way for the data governance systems of that company product to be independently evaluated and be given a rating that will be facing to the to users and adopters of the applications. So I'm going to let Kavya take over to explain that more coherently.
Thanks, Julia. And that was a good sort of a primer. Banu, if you're going to move to another slide, as I just talked briefly about what Julia just mentioned, the RDG standards. And do we have more slides, or this is the only one? Because I rather just go deeper into more technical aspects of the RDG. Okay, got it. Okay, so if you could go back to the previous slide. So it's obvious to most of us that patient safety is directly linked to how we manage our data. And then it is directly linked to trust. And this is the goal of building such a standard. We at XRS are trying to fill this deficit that industry has around how they govern the data. And one of the first things that first targeted aspect of this sort of industry segment is the third parties and the developers ecosystem. So currently we have developed a standard. It is labeled as XRSI IP standard. It will be freely available. However, when companies or any kind of developer on any platform wants to adopt it and place that market trust, they would have to go through an accredited body. And we would recruit multiple accredited body over time as we scale. And also we would recruit accredited training partners. So this whole business model is already being finalized, and if we would launch this standard at AWE. There is no particular reason. AWE is one of my favorite trustworthy type of conference. I rather go to the one that we know of. It is not yet directly targeted to healthcare industry. However, after we have the first cohort, we would be in a better position to then present it and sort of finesse some of the marketing material towards the immersive healthcare segment. So let me go into what is really inside this standard. it may remind those who are familiar with PCI DSS, it may remind you of that similar approach, where PCI DSS, whenever you're doing any kind of payment transaction, you have to attest that you have gone through a process to uh, abide by these certain specific goals and requirements. And that's basically what it is. We have 1, 2, 3, 7, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, what am I counting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have seven goals, and data lifecycle management is the first one, where basically we're asking companies, hey, can you demonstrate what inferences are you making, what kind of sensitive data? So we would be looking at the companies, the third parties, black boxes, which they don't have to tell everybody, but XRSI will collect, self-proclaimed, but also we would gather evidence. Role-based accountability. So this is really just talking to, do all your employees, third parties, anybody touches the data, do they know what kind of policies, protocols, data handling procedures, etc., are they supposed to follow? And so it will look into who owns the data, how it is transferred. So if you look at the entire data lifecycle from create, collect, share, manage, all the way to disposal, we want the companies to gain visibility at every single step. Now, how is it so different than any kind of GDPR? GDPR sort of kicks in and audits things once there is something bad happened. This says, hey, third party, hey, developer, if you want to work on my platform, hey, third party, if you want to do millions of dollars of business with me, hey, any kind of vendor, you want me to onboard you in my hospital network, I would like you to adopt these standards, go to XRSI accredited bodies and get this mark. They will be required to pay. A SMB average cost of this certification is around $10,000. But then again, depending on the scope of the organization, this could go upwards of $50,000, just like a SOC, ISO, anything like that. It is an investment because then they would get a mark of trust over time, because currently there are a variety of versions of immersive APIs. We're not going to put out an immersive API, but over time, that is our goal. Based on the first cohort, what we learn, we may put a augmented reality type or a mixed reality type API that can directly be embedded into your product wherever the third party intends. Like, I want to demonstrate the mark of trust here. The registry would be maintained by XRSI, but all of the work, all of the guidance, consulting, everything will be by the accredited bodies. We'll make money a little bit to sustain the standards and continue the research and development through licensing fee directly to the accredited bodies, the certified bodies for CBs. So we are essentially not going to charge. XRSI will provide the standard for free. And this is process standardization, third-party data governance. All of this has already been mapped and aligned to GDPR, primary NIST standards, also some of the aspects of HIPAA. HIPAA, however, doesn't go deep into sensitive inferred data. This is the one key point here as we go into the sensitive inferred data. The checkbox, that's one of the goals. It's like you have to abide by all the regulatory compliance requirements. So that is one of the goals. If you're doing that, you're already way ahead. You're already ready to adopt the standard. And then finally, the continuous improvement. And the way the continuous improvement will take place will certainly be willing to, there is a scoring system that goes along with this assessment. So we would provide all the guidance to these accredited bodies. They will assess, they will provide a scoring system, they'll provide a rating. If you hit a threshold of like almost 80%, then you're certainly eligible for the mark of trust. But if you're below, then they would help the company, third parties, or the developer who's on the platform upgrade their standards. upgrade how to govern the data. This is more of a hygiene of how we are governing. So this is automatically, it's called responsible. We just want people to be more responsible and work towards reducing that deficit of trust. So as soon as people see, oh, I am in this environment, how do I trust this environment? The first indicator of trust is you have the mark of trust, XRSI. So that's how we want to position it. This is one of the many suites of certification and standards. There will be others that come down the pipe, but we want to start with this. AWE is the launch, and thereafter we will go further into refining our approach to how it's relevant to various markets. So we do intend to first go to the healthcare aspects because that's where the need is. And if the healthcare industry accepts and adopts it, then the rest of the industries would see it as like this, high bar and will be more likely to. Banu, is there any other slide, or I can
These are the only slides on the
these are
deck.
the only slides, yeah. Yeah, I wonder if there are any questions around this. I can even go as far as what is our current marketing strategy around it, but happy to, answer any questions. I'm willing to share a quick reference guide, a fact sheet, on the condition that it must not be made public until AWE. I'm also willing to share a pitch deck with you guys, also on the condition that you can take permission with XRSI or bring XRSI into the conversations that you may be having about this standard. So yeah, would love to answer any questions related to responsible data governance standards and certifications. And
Thank you.
I still feel so dumb about counting. I don't know what's happening to my brain.
It's hard to present and count at the same time. Yeah, from from like a healthcare system point of view, would this external audit certification or evaluation of data governance would it be useful? Do you see it coming into conflict or convergence with the way kind of IT and data is managed already within a system, or is it solving a problem that hasn't been addressed in data management when it comes to healthcare data or basically third party software that patients or doctors like interface with? I think that's more of where this is fitting in, not things that are completely inside of a healthcare system.
Yeah. So I think the two things that this is going to really help the healthcare industry with is, one is the sort of a protective barrier around the data is moving from here to there, but most of the times we only ask the question, what the hell are you doing with the data, or what kind of data, when the data is lost, when there is a data breach. So this kind of flips that model of accountability, which comes into play because of laws and legals. And then it's like, oh, you lost social, what else did you lose? Versus like, hey, this standard really takes a holistic approach to that. So more of a protective barrier, so enhancing trust when people see. Also, it will simplify that aspect of like 70-page privacy policy is something that you got to read in order to have that sense of trust. We would be the auditors, or we would be the people behind, hey, you can trust this organization. So we'll implement a specific protocol in our registry. We're calling it traffic light protocols. Again, one of those, internal knowledge for now, where if somebody goes onto the registry, they could see if the organization is a green, red, or yellow, depending on what they have done with their certification and reassessment, etc. The second thing, it would also help with interoperability, because organizations would have to then adopt ways to easily share the data. It would enable sharing rather than you cannot, because we are auditing entire data lifecycle. And more and more technical measures and interoperability measures that a system or a network adopts, easier it would be for them to go through this kind of audit, because everything is happening sort of seamlessly, and they may be able to produce easier evidence. So when we score the various requirements that generate out of these goals and functions, we score them based on specifically that. Do you have some loosey-goosey Excel sheet, or are you really well versed and it's interoperable and all of your data is accounted for through AI systems and use, and everything is basically accounted for throughout the data lifecycle? So that will be, that's how we score the maturity of all of these. So all of this internal knowledge, while some of it may or may not be public when we launch, but yeah, this aids towards that, enabling interoperability, creating that sort of protective shield, but really enhancing the trust, specifically when you're moving really, really fast in the information ecosystem. You don't have time to read the policies. What you can rely on is the mark of trust, XRSI, kind of like UL. You pick up a gadget and like, oh, okay, this is well certified. So that's where we want to position at least the first certification, and then others too.
Any thoughts? Impressions?
Hey, Joe, and I received the books. Thank you so much. Just wanted to mention that. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. And well, I know it's a lot to absorb at once, but definitely, have a think about it. Go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
No, thanks for the overview. And for the record, I'm participating here on my personal lunch break, so I'm not representing the federal government in any way. I'm just representing AMXRA. But I have worked in large healthcare industries, in systems, and I think this makes a ton of sense. Although I would also say that it would be, I just think we should all just be very clear that this probably will not negate the security reviews that will have to happen to enable these kind of solutions to be on, like, on a hospital network, right? Like, even with if the goal is to make essentially like a proxy to UL or high trust or something like that, or an umbrella for these things, I think that makes a ton of sense. But just it would be helpful to think about how this is framed for the first version, and who benefits, because I'm not fully sure health systems would, because the technology is so new, it still has a lot of scrutiny from the get-go. That's just some initial thoughts, but I think the approach is a good one.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're sort of hesitant to proclaim that this is meant for a particular sector of the industry, and you're completely right about that. What we are dead sure, which I have worked at Meta before as a third-party security risk consultant, is there is an absolute need. So we're already in conversation with their teams internally, with their developer ecosystem, and then we'll put it forward to HTC, we'll put it forward to Pico. What we do know is that enterprise platforms that are dealing with immersive API, for example, like a pass-through API, or third parties, 200s, 300s, and upwards of almost thousands, and they're just coming in and out. When they demand SOC, ISO, and other pen test, what it still doesn't cover, from my professional expertise, is that granular aspect of data that a person is giving to them through the sensors, through all of this. And that's kind of where it really does fit in. So we're starting out at least with that. And that could go on to any healthcare or any other ecosystem. We're not targeting it just yet, because
Yeah.
just like you said, this needs to be finessed and
Yep.
really made sure that we are hitting the need of the industry, and we're not just, trying to slap something on for the sake of it.
Yeah.
So I'm very supportive. I think this is great. And as a sidebar, let me know if there's any interest in like having some deeper collaboration with AMXRA on this.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Mark. The any other thoughts on this first impressions?
From me. I think we've talked about this before, haven't we, Javier? And I think this is a great idea. I can see how we would apply this to some of our procurement frameworks, absolutely. Initial reflections, I can see how this, with some of the barriers and the challenges to adopting this in the UK. I'd be keen to maybe chat with you, Mark, and see what some of the challenges would be to adoption on your side of the Atlantic, because I suspect they're probably similar, but I think culture is going to play a big role in whether this gets adopted or not. It's not just a technical framework that people implement it. It's whether the organisations, whether hospitals, whether primary care is ready for this kind of framework yet. Yeah, I suppose that the other thing I was just sort of reflecting on is how would we encourage suppliers to join this in the first place? I think that could be a barrier, because I think we already ask quite a lot of our suppliers. They have to be GDPR compliant, they have to be compliant with all sorts of government frameworks around finances and things like that. This is just yet another hurdle for them. This is not to be critical of what you've talked about, because I think it's brilliant. And I really support it personally, but I can see some of our suppliers really pushing back on this, and I think it might be a challenge to get them to sign up to this.
Yeah. So what you're saying, Richard, is that there's already a lot of compliance required that may or may not be well coordinated with one another, and then having another opportunity for review may just be too burdensome. Like, even if it does elevate the consumer trust or the adopter trust, it may not be within the capacity. But I think, Kavya, there's a solution for that. This is supposed to be relatively light lift once it's gone through the first cohort, right? More automated.
Essentially. So Richard, you're absolutely right. This is something that cannot happen as a push onto the organization. This would have to be a top-down, leadership wants to elevate the trust within their network and the system, and they want to demonstrate that we are different than the rest of the immersive folks or anybody who's doing this sort of move fast emerging tech. Why, it really appeals to Meta, no brainer for them. People who have literally been caught red-handed with abuse of data, that's an absolute no-brainer. So they can absolutely demonstrate as the first market capture, like themselves a leader. I do think something like, for example, NHS has this D-Tech internally sort of developed. We want to make sure that our vendors are doing the right thing. And that's kind of also where it could fit in, where you extend, in addition to DTAC, you say, we're not just going to check our own homework, we're also going to authorize this other third parties. Because if somebody third party wants to take some money and exchange data and do business with you, it is actually in the interest of the system, of the network, to have them go through that extra step and validate to me so I could do millions of dollars of business with you, but I really am preserving patient trust here. So I would like you to go through this. So this is kind of how it might be beneficial to the leadership to sort of demonstrate that extra step of trust, but it really has to come down from the top. There isn't any push that we can do like, hey, developers, over time, for sure, we could certainly go to the consumer market and be like, hey, you should be asking for XRSI market trust. Without that, if you're performing operations, you're just playing around with the data. And that's kind of the long-term feeling we want with XRSI mark of trust.
Thank you, Kavya. So I think after that, the first cohort, when we have kind of the feedback from that, we'll make this another agenda topic for the health council, for the medical council. The last thing I want to leave you with, and I forgot to put this into the events list, and I'll put it on the Slack again. If you're in the Boston area in June, I'm going to be at the Bio Convention. This is a large biopharma conference. I put the link to the program in the chat, and they asked me for the second year to do an XR session for the biopharma group, which I know sounds ridiculous, but it was well attended the first year. So this year they've given us an entire afternoon to highlight that intersection between this sort of technology and biopharma, where it falls into place at many points, but the focus area we have right now is on the impact on patient outcomes undergoing treatment. So how this is something that can actually enhance the patient outcomes, not take away or detract from the biopharm objective, which is to distribute their medicines. Kavya.
So thank you, Julia. I was curious if I may reach out to each one of you one-on-one to start gathering what you have, your expertise, your perspective on this RDG standard, just going back to it. And I know, Richard, I already sent you an email, you and Neil. Don't know if I used the right email. I thought I did.
I did, and I apologize, I haven't replied.
Oh, no worries. But I really want to, get those perspectives. And because even though I don't want to have to wait until the first cohort or the second cohort, it would really go into understanding the expertise that we have here to directly then apply it to, once we are ready with the first cohort, what could be a potential next step to target this segment of the market. So if you're okay, I would love to reach out to you, Mark, Janet, Ryan, and anyone that will, see the recording. I would love to get just like a 45 minutes, 30 minutes with you to fully share what's in it, and then maybe, have your perspective on, what could possibly make it a successful effort when it comes down to it.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. And so we don't have a meeting next month because it overlaps with AWE, and we usually don't do the synchronous council meetings through the summer months, but we'll stay in touch in each of these areas we discussed and the projects that are ongoing, and we'll reconvene with council meetings in September. So thank you, everyone, for your participation today and sharing your thoughts on how we can be more effective. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Have a good summer. Alrighty.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Cheers.